Hello, everyone. Hello, soldiers, and welcome to this military combat review. Our war with the Klingons does not go well, and excuse me. Sorry about that. Welcome back to the Hit or Miss Star Trek podcast. It's all good. Tasha Yar went and killed herself, so we're back to the original timeline now.
Yay!
That was just a little wee skit to give you a hint of which episode.
Not gonna lie, when we rewatched the episode, at the end when Guinan says, I think it's to Geordie, she just goes, "Tell me about Tasha Yar." I was really hoping he just turned and went, "Oh, that bitch."
I didn't really know it.
I was really expecting Geordie to turn around and go, "Who?"
Why are you asking me?
Exactly. No, well, sorry about the little distraction, everyone. But yes, welcome back to the Hit or Miss Star Trek podcast on YouTube and now on Spotify. You can check us out there at Hit or Miss Star Trek.
I wonder which podcast you may have taken after putting yourself on Spotify there, Mike.
It was actually Will's idea, my friend Will Templar, who helps me with all that kind of thing. So blame him.
Well, we beat you both to it, so
that's no surprise. That does not shock me one little bit. But yeah, welcome back. As I say, you can find us on Spotify now. I'll put a link in the description. But if you are joining us, you probably know how things are by now. I'm never on my own, and just like last week, I'm joined by two guests this week. Two guests.
Double the trouble. It's a threesome this week.
Two guests who, in this case, are two people who have become really good friends of mine and who I've become a huge fan of, courtesy of the We Pay for Your Floor podcast, which you can catch on the YouTube channel. I recommend it. So and why don't you...
Don't forget and Spotify.
And Spotify. I'm sorry. I'll link it all in the descriptions. But yeah, why not introduce yourselves, you two ruffians? Let's go.
Go on, Chocolate Slut. You can go first.
My name's Phil, and I am the long-suffering other half of the mouthy one.
That's Phil.
Fair enough. And would you like to introduce yourself, Andy?
Hello, my name's Andy.
There we go.
I'm one other third of We Pay for Your Floor, and also Phil's partner of over 7.5 years now. Jesus Christ, how's it been that long?
Yes, well, so yeah, as I say, if you've been following me for a while, you probably know Andy and probably Phil from some of our previous kind of Doctor Who review podcasts. So this is a bit of a reunion, but you know, as I said, they've started their own podcast as well, and it's very good. So before I go any further, Andy, Phil, how's your ceiling?
Yes!
Oh, it's getting some damp patches. I'm a little bit worried.
I will tell you how our ceiling is. Unable to do basic mathematical calculations.
What the heck? What does that even mean?
It can't tell the difference between horizontal and vertical either. Sometimes it's just a sheer drop. It's very unnerving.
Yes, yeah. You're referring to the person on the other side of the ceiling now. But,
can't even count to 3.
I'm not going to insult her because she's not here to defend herself, and I think she thinks I dislike her for some reason. So no.
No, she doesn't. She knows she don't. It was just she's kind of had an unrunning joke grudge against you since my birthday one, when you said you'd been killed, and then right at the end said Sarah did it, by the way.
But enough of this nonsense. We're here to talk about Star Trek. But, yeah, so if you haven't been joining me, well, go back and watch the previous episodes if you want to know what the format is. But just in case, this podcast, does break down into sections. The first one is the section that is basically just a getting to know you type thing, where I'll ask questions to, in this case, Andy and Phil. The second question is the hit or miss section, which you may be familiar with from our Doctor Who days, where I just throw out random Trek things and ask Andy and Phil if they think it's a hit or a miss, and then see who agrees with me, basically. And then we'll get into the episode review following that, which is obviously, in case you haven't already guessed from all of the many, many hints, is going to be yesterday's Enterprise from Next Gen. And then we'll end it with the usual Gene's Vision and audience interaction sections. So, yeah, if there's nothing else, then without any further ado, I'll move us to section number 1.
I will just say before we get into everything, obviously you are aware of this, but just for the audience's sake, I haven't seen that much Trek in the grand scheme of things. Phil has seen way more than I have, and he's like slowly working me through it. So a lot of this is going to be Phil and Mike sort of bantering, and me just in the back, just probably laughing at some silly thing that's either come to my mind or been said that I've taken the wrong way.
Yeah, I should have said that at the start. Yeah, to be perfectly honest, I know you've been working through Next Generation, so the hit or miss section is basically almost entirely Next Generation stuff.
Oh, that's all right then.
And if anyone's curious, that's why. It's because I know that's the one that Andy's seen. Anyway, we'll go into section number 1 then, which is the section that I call Healing Frequencies Open, and that is the section which is basically. I always ask, and this is going to be very brief for Andy, I suspect, because we probably know the answer, but it's basically where I ask, what was it that first got you interested in Star Trek? What was it that started you watching and thinking, oh, this is something I want to watch more of? And can you remember what the first episode is that you watched? And Andy, we'll go with you first, since you know the answer.
So, well, actually, I remember seeing, like, a few, like, some episodes growing up because, like, my mum and dad like Star Trek, you know, I'm pretty sure they've watched through all of them, like, over the course of, you know, the years. So I've seen, like, odd episodes with them. And I've never disliked Star Trek. But I only really sort of started kind of getting into it once I met Phil, and he started getting me to watch it a while ago. The first episode I remember actively watching. I can't even remember what it's titled, I'm not going to lie. But the first part that made me sort of start paying proper attention was me mishearing something. It was an episode of TNG, I know that because it was Diana Troy, and they'd just been teleported. I don't know where to. I think it was to another ship, but they'd been teleported, and the is it called a tractor beam? I can't remember what they call it in Star Trek. The teleporting. I'm going to
the transporter.
The transporter, yeah. It was like very slightly off by like a few meters. So like they come down and then it goes back up and then they come back down again where they were meant to be. And the first thing Deanna Troy says when they first come back down is, "Oh, I thought I was stuck in that wall, but I heard, oh, for a minute I was fucking that wall." And after that sort of like mishearing, I was like, "I'm listening. Go on." Yeah. Oh god.
I think that episode was Justice from Series 1 of TNG.
Oh, okay. Wow, well remembered, Phil. Oh, so So as you're the expert, then, Phil, can you remember your first exposure and what your first episode was?
My first exposure was probably the original series.
Nice.
My dad was a big fan of that. But particularly seeing episodes like on reruns on Channel 4 back in the 90s. But the first block that I really remember is watching Next Gen a lot as I was growing up. And it was Chain of Command that was the one that always sticks out to me, probably because it's such a well-renowned, well-revered,
It's fantastic,
sort of sequence of stories. But just for some reason, seeing Jean-Luc Picard going through all of that, I'm not going to say too much because Andy hasn't gotten to it yet. But that's one that really stuck out to me. And then I sort of started working my way back through the movies and everything from there, and eventually trying to branch off to DS9 and Voyager when they came along as well, which was cool.
Okay, awesome.
I have seen some Voyager, I will just say. I have seen some Voyager and I love Janeway.
Okay, awesome. Well, that's, okay. Fair enough. I already did her on the hit and miss section. I put her on the hit and miss section, I should say, last week. So we can't do it again. But yeah,
but was she a hit? That's the main thing.
She was a massive hit with all three of us on the podcast.
Good, absolutely, as deserved.
Well, if you're a fan of Captain Janeway, will you be watching Star Trek Prodigy when it launches in a couple of weeks, Andy?
Wait, what? What is that? Star Trek?
There's a new Star Trek animated series that's it's aimed at kids, so it's co-made by Nickelodeon, but it's that doesn't mean adults can't watch it. And one of the lead characters is a hologram of Captain Janeway, who's taking these kind of kids through. Oh, you're looking at it now. Okay, fair enough. Yeah. So yeah, as a Janeway fan, you should probably give that a watch and see what it's like. I'm just trying to get everybody to watch more Star Trek, but anyway, enough of this.
There's nothing wrong with that.
It's like a cult.
With me, it is. Yes.
Have you heard anything about our Lord and Savior, Jean-Luc Picard?
Everyone will be assimilated.
Yeah, so the next part of this section would be I would normally ask, and again, this is probably going to be difficult, Andy. You may have to give descriptions rather than titles, but I always ask if you had to pick 3 episodes that you think exemplified the best of Star Trek, or that you would show to somebody who's completely new to Trek to show what the best sort of example of what it could be. What would those 3 episodes be? And again, Andy, we'll start with you because you'll probably have to describe them.
I'm trying to even think of the best ones that I've seen. I mean, I don't really want to spoil the review for later, but I'd absolutely put the episode we're going to be talking about up there.
Fair enough.
I of the ones that I have seen, this is one. I mean, this is why you picked this one for us to do, because you wanted us on and you heard that I really liked this one. But yeah, I remember when we first watched. Yeah, when we first watched this one, I was absolutely blown away. I was like, wow, that was really good. And then. I'm trying to think. Usually episodes with O are like really good. Is it O? Am I getting that wrong?
Do you mean Q?
Do you mean Q? I knew it was a letter, and I was like, is it O? Is it Q? Which one is it? And then I was I thought I went with O, and then I realised that's the Master's code name from Series 12, and now I look like an absolute pillar.
I can understand why you were confused with that one, though, because we've been watching a lot of James Bond-related stuff recently, and obviously Q's been mentioned a lot in there, so I'll let that one slide.
I mean, with all the episodes with Q tend to be really good. From the ones that I've seen, they've always tended to be really good.
So is that have you seen the next gen DS9 and Voyager Q episodes, or are you just on the next gen one so far?
Just in the next gen one so far. The ones that I've been up to anyway.
Well, to be fair, he made 1 appearance on DS9, but there was a good few Voyager ones, and they're all pretty good as well.
I've heard DS9. I've heard I should watch DS9. I've heard DS9 is really, really good.
It's one of those, yeah.
It seems to be like a divisive one, but most people I know seem to really like it.
It's one of those things because it's so involved, those that really dedicate the time to it come away loving it, but it's not what I would recommend as a kind of starting point or as a casual view, because you really have to watch it like all 7 years in order, back to back. It's one contained story, so it's not like, for example, Next Generation, where I could give you like a list of 5 episodes from completely different seasons and you wouldn't be lost with any of them.
Because Next Generation is kind of, and I don't like to use this term, but it's kind of very much formulaic in the way that like maybe not this upcoming series, but a lot of Doctor Who's where it's kind of like story of the week, whereas from what you just said, DS9's like it's a non-running story throughout.
It is. I mean, characters get to grow and things do develop in Next Generation, but not to the point where it would be unrecognizable from week to week, you know. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So you're going to go there. You're going to go with yesterday's Enterprise and just a couple of Q episodes, maybe.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I feel like I'm a bad guess now.
No, not at all. Not at all. I feel I'm really intrigued to know what your 3 would be and if they'd include Chain of Command or not.
Oh, one that always pops to mind is The Measure of a Man.
Nice. That's come up before. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I've shown you that one, Andy. It's the one where they're sort of debating over the morality or the ethics of whether data can be classed as a living sentient being.
Yes, that one was really good. Yes, I really liked that one. I remember that one.
Awesome. Yeah.
Just the speech from Picard during that trial is
just out of curiosity, just because it's a random episode that I've just remembered exists. I don't know what the consensus is on whether people think it's a good episode or not. Mike, I can't remember the title of the episode, but the one where Data has a daughter.
Oh, we mentioned that a lot. Yes, The Offspring, one of my absolute favorites. This came up because it was on the. I put Lal on the hit or miss section a few weeks ago, and it's related to what's happening in Picard. So it was the Picard episode. Yeah. So yeah, I love that episode. It breaks my heart every time at the end.
Yeah, I remember that one being really good from when we watched it.
I like a lot of season 3 of Next Generation, which is what the episode we're reviewing is from as well.
Yeah. Actually, that's the episode after the one we're reviewing.
It is, yeah.
Maybe that's why it stood out to me, because I really paid attention during this one, and then I was like, watching quite heavily during the next few as well.
This is a good batch of episodes because I like Sins of the Father, the Klingon episode that's right after that as well. So these 3 in a row.
I also really like A Matter of Perspective, which is another series.
Nice.
1.
Yes, that's just before the one we're reviewing today.
Yeah.
That one, Andy, was the sort of I suppose you could count as a murder mystery one, where they used the holodeck to reenact.
Oh yes, I quite liked that one. That one was kind of fun. I think I predicted who did it though.
Of course you bloody did. You could be watching something for 5 minutes and it's like, it was him. How do you know that? He's only been on screen half a second.
And then Deja Q was just before that, and I really liked
Yes.
Deja Q because that's the one where Q is saying, or he's been like ejected from the Q. Is it the Q Continuum? Is that what they're called?
It is. Well done.
It's like I've been ejected from the Q Continuum. Can you take me in? That one was kind of
stripped his powers
interesting.
away.
Yeah, I really liked that one because it kind of had a really fun dynamic between Picard and Q, who are obviously normally like enemies, and it was interesting seeing their mind sort of battle, but in like a very interesting way. They almost kind of bonded a little bit. I liked that one a lot.
Another of my favorites. But anyway, we've railroaded you and we haven't got your other two, Phil. You said measure
Sorry,
of one.
yeah.
And what were the other two?
Yes. One that always stands out to me, although I haven't watched it in a very long time, is Darmok.
Oh, very good. Yes, that hasn't come up enough, really.
That one's, again, I don't want to give too much away because it's a couple of series down the road from where we are. But just, it's one of those that seems like a very Roddenberry sort of thing of cohesion, learning to work together despite your differences, which I really like.
100%, and it's unique in that really sort of bizarre science fiction-y way that you'd like, wow, how did you think of this? Which a lot of Yesterday's Enterprise, I think, is a bit like that at times as well. But yeah, it was cool to see that species return for a more comedic appearance in Lower Decks recently. Because
I need to watch Lower Decks more. I need to watch Lower Decks.
Oh, you really should. It's very, very, very good. So, what was your third episode anyway?
My third one, I can't narrow it down. I'd maybe go with Chain of Command, just because that is something that whenever I think of Next Gen, I always think of Chain of Command, even though, again, I haven't watched it in quite a while now. But
very powerful episode.
It's one that's been burned into my mind since I was a kid. So, yeah, that one's always got to be on the list somewhere.
Fair enough.
This would probably be an odd choice, but I'm quite fond of Generations. I know a lot of people are a bit iffy on that one, but I quite like Generations.
That may well stand to reason with the episode we're reviewing for a reason that I will get into a little bit later. But yes, so yeah, that's kind of cool. Then we've got a fair summation, I think, of all of your tastes. And yes, it's Next Generation heavy, but we've pointed out that Andy also loves Voyager and Captain Janeway. So, and I love to hear about people being indoctrinated into Trek, for want of a better word. So
I will say as well, I just remembered another random. I don't know why I remembered this one, and not because I thought it was like particularly amazing, just because it was very bizarre. Was the one where Picard was kidnapped and like put in that prison with like the 4 other prisoners, and they're trying to work out how to break out. But then there's the copy Picard who like gets all seductive and like tries to sleep with Beverly, and it was like the fuck. This is a weird episode.
That's literally another of season 3, Allegiance. I could just list season 3 amongst my favorites. Captain's Holiday is great. Tin Man, Hollow Pursuits, The Most Toys, Sarek. Best of Both Worlds, Part 1, all Series 3, all in my like top Trek episodes. But yeah, so when people ask me what my favorite overall season is, it's Next Generation season 3, without a doubt. But yeah, that's cool.
It does have some very good episodes in this series. Just looking down the list now, I've brought it up. I mean, you've listed off most of them anyway, but my God, it is a really strong series.
It's a stacked series. I love the 2 Romulan ones as well. The Defector and the Enemy are also great.
Yes.
Anyway,
sorry,
just a love fest.
Going on about all of the episodes.
No, that's cool. I mean, people can get a sense of our tastes, and I think you've proven that you both know what you're talking about, so that's good. So we will, in that vein, move to the next section, which is the hit or miss section. And again, if you're not familiar, I basically just call out things from anywhere in the Trek franchise. My guests have no idea what they're going to be because I don't tell them in advance, except in one special case this week because Andy made a specific request.
Sean knows exactly what it's going to be now, I bet.
Oh, don't worry. It'll come up, don't worry. But yeah, so moving on into what the hit or miss section is then. I'll try to keep it brief because I've got a lot of audience interaction and it's a big episode that we're talking about. So I'll only do probably like 4 or 5. But the first one on the list for today, quite appropriately, is Captain or Admiral Jean-Luc Picard, hit or miss. And why don't we start with you, Andy? We'll go that way.
Absolutely a hit.
Awesome.
I don't think I can really say Michelle. She's fucking great.
Well, you've mentioned a few of his highlights already. Measure of a Man was great that you enjoyed, and I'm sure we'll get into his part.
Yeah, I really like how he runs his crew and how fair he is, and how, like, you know, morally sound he is. He never like. I mean, I guess it was kind of the whole point of Star Trek because it was very diverse for the time. But like how like he never judges people based on their like their creed or anything like that. He's great. I really like Picard a lot.
Fair enough.
I think it says a lot about the fact that when obviously Star Trek kind of got a revival, he was like one of the first, if not like the first, like previous series character to be brought back for their own thing.
Not quite the first, I would say Captain Pike was, but he was certainly the first actor playing the same character. Yeah, definitely. Okay, what about you, Phil?
There's so much you can, but so much you don't need to say about Jean-Luc Picard. He's just wonderful. He is marvelous, and I want to know what the hell Patrick Stewart is eating or drinking because the man just doesn't bloody age. It's been said countless times, but he has not changed since the 80s.
It's all the Earl Grey.
That's what we're doing wrong. All these people with chamomile tea and stuff, Earl Grey. That's the key to it, isn't it? But I'll go ahead and I'll say the same. Picard has been my favorite captain for a long time, so absolute hit. But with the proviso that I do not love what they've done with him at the end of Picard season 1, the series, which I won't spoil in case anybody hasn't seen it. But I'm not overly fond of the way that's gone. But other than that, I just adore all 7 seasons of Next Gen and the movies. And yeah, I wanted to be Patrick Stewart as Jean-Luc Picard for a while when I was a late teenager, just to be that classy and that cool. But, well, cool to me, probably not so much to anyone that wasn't a nerd. Anyway, so yeah, 3 big hits, I think.
I think Picard's coolness transcends nerdery.
I think so, yeah.
He's on his own level.
He is. You're absolutely right. And but I still wouldn't go into school drinking Earl Grey or whatever back in the day. Number 2 on my list, and I'm not sure why this came up, but it was from the original series. And this is the character of Scotty, hit or miss.
Oh, I love Scotty. He's a definite hit for me. He just brightens up any scene that he's in. And he mucks in. He actually, without Scotty, the Enterprise would have fallen apart 50 times over.
Absolutely.
No, Scotty's a definite hit.
Awesome. And Andy, are you familiar enough with the original Scotty?
I don't think so. Although I do know that he never actually. The words "beam me up, Scotty" never actually said.
No, not in those exact forms. That's true. Yeah. Just one of those things. Are you familiar with? Are you familiar with the Simon Pegg Scotty from the reboot?
I was literally about to say. I just looked him up and I'm like, oh no, that is who Simon Pegg played. I am vaguely familiar with the Simon Pegg one because I'm pretty sure I've seen some of the more like bits of the more recent Star Trek films, but I don't think I really know anything about the original one now. But from what I vaguely remember, I didn't mind Simon Pegg in the role. That he seemed fine. Yeah.
Awesome.
I don't really know if I can say much else. Sorry.
That's fine. So well, I'd say you'll probably think the character's a hit, but maybe look up a little bit about him before you get to the episode Relics in the Next Generation season 6, I believe.
Oh yes.
Because that will come up. But anyway. Yeah, I'd say hit Scotty, definitely. He's the famed miracle worker. And yes, I love that even though he admits he multiplies his repairs by a factor of 4 to sound more like a genius, that's an ingenious within itself, if you ask me. So, definitely. Yeah, I think he's a good guy and, doesn't get enough credit for being second officer of the original Enterprise either, when you think of some of the crap he had to put up with while Kirk and Spock were off gallivanting. But anyway.
Yeah, I always forget he was second officer. Bloody hell.
Yeah. It's weird, isn't it? Because it's chief engineer and second officer. Bizarre. Anyway, so number 3 on the list. Andy will like this, but it's not the one he requested. Number 3 on the list today is Guinan. Hit or miss?
I fucking love Guinan. I think part of that is a bit of a bias because I adore Whoopi Goldberg, but yeah, I think Guinan's awesome. I don't know where her character ends up by the end of the series. I don't know if we find out more about... I assume we'll find out more about her as the series goes on. But if not, I don't really mind because I quite like that there's a lot of mystery around her character. But yeah, I love Guinan.
I will say without spoilers that she's heavily featured in Star Trek Generations, the movie, when you reach it. So
yes.
Yeah. You'll enjoy that one, I suspect.
Yeah, Guinan's absolute hit. I love Guinan.
Awesome. Do you know the story, by the way, out of curiosity, of how Whoopi Goldberg and Guinan ended up on the show?
No, I don't think so.
It's a really cool story because it stems back from like Nichelle Nichols being in the original series, who played Uhura, and apparently Whoopi Goldberg.
We've met her.
Really?
Yes, we have.
Oh, you legends!
Yeah,
now
we met her in
so
Nottingham.
jealous. I am so jealous. What was she like?
She was
Fabulous.
everything you can imagine. She
Oh man, that's good to hear.
oozed class.
Such a glorious diva. Sweet. Cool. But yeah, so basically, to answer the question I posed, the reason she ended up on the show, Whoopi Goldberg herself approached like Gene Roddenberry and the makers of Next Gen because she was a huge fan of Nichelle Nichols as Uhura for sort of the first really good like black representation and being an equal of the crew and stuff. But obviously, Next Gen at this point had been running for half a series, so they were like, well, what do we do? Which is why randomly at the start of series 2, they've built a bar and given her a random character because they were like, Whoopi Goldberg wants to be on the show. We'll just invent a character for her. It doesn't matter. So I kind of love that story that she basically just got given a bar out of nowhere that wasn't in existence before. And yeah, she's a cool character. She is kind of cool and mysterious. And there's lots more for you if you're only up to around season 3, 4. There's way more to come that you'll enjoy, I'm sure. So.
Oh, good. I quite like the fact that the Enterprise just randomly got a bar. Like, I don't know. It makes it feel more, I don't know, homely. I like that.
Yeah, it's cool. 10 forward's a good little thing. But yeah. So Phil, would you say hit or miss for Guinan then?
Oh, I mean, this is becoming a bit sort of predictable now, but she's a definite hit.
Awesome. Yeah, this is probably going to be one of the more sycophantic ones because I'm with you. But yeah, reasons for you loving Guinan, are they the same?
Probably. There was one. I can't remember what episode it was from, but I was looking up things of Guinan the other day, and there was just a picture of her in 10 forward with like a laser rifle or something, just shooting it into the air, and I can't remember what that's from, but I just this face of pure glee that she's pulling while she's just shooting up into the air. That everything that Guinan does just makes me happy.
She's great, and that
whether
fashion sense.
It is shooting into the air like a maniac, or the more serious, somber sort of counsel that she gives to some of the different characters. She's she's great.
Even this is probably going to be a slight spoiler, but I won't get into it too much. But the scenes in Best of Both Worlds when she's counseling Riker, who's had to kind of step up a bit, and the reasons why and kind of how she gets into that, I think really powerful in what's already a really stacked kind of episode. But that's a little slightly off topic, but yeah, I agree. I think Guinan's just a great character, really. And I like that there's a little bit of mystery to her. She's very she's almost Doctor Who-like, I guess, in that way, that we never quite find fully out everything about her history or her species or anything. I mean, we know enough to get by, but there's still enough there that, like, how does she know all these things? How does she live so long? How does she sense different timelines? And yeah, it's cool. Very cool. So the next thing on the list then for today, because it was appropriate, is the Enterprise D. Is it a hit or a miss? What would you say?
I'd say it's a definite hit. I'm trying to think how best to word it. Compared to some of the bridges of like the earlier class ships in the films, I just love how the Enterprise D looks. Maybe it's more nostalgia coming through because I grew up more with TNG than any of the other series. But just the look of that original bridge is very, very nice. And then the ship itself, it's beautiful. And I always get tingles whenever they do a saucer separation.
I was just going to say that.
That's wonderful.
Awesome stuff. Yeah, the bridge always reminded me a lot of a kind of 80s hotel lobby. It's very sort of comfortable and carpeted, isn't it? Really?
Yeah. With like the sleek wood, lots of carpet, just like you checking in for the weekend. Certainly, come on in, sir.
Exactly. So, what about you, Andy? Are you a fan of the Enterprise D from Next Gen?
Absolutely. It's awesome. Like iconic. Even as a kid, like not even seen much Star Trek, I knew what the Enterprise D was.
Awesome.
I will say I don't know if I prefer it to the Voyager ship. I don't know. I have a big soft spot for the design for the Voyager ship, which I think is the one that we have on top of the shelves right next to me.
We do, yeah. We've got a little model
Awesome.
on the top of the shelves, surrounded by Daleks.
Yeah, and Waluigi for some reason.
Well, you know, it's got to encounter some troubles.
That's
No,
very weird.
it is an absolute hit, though. Definitely. It's iconic.
That's
Awesome,
that's the crossover that never quite got commissioned. Daleks in the Delta Quadrant.
Daleks and Waluigi, which is the weirder part of that sentence, to be honest. I mean, giant Daleks is one thing, but it kind of fits the theme. A giant Waluigi, that's an episode I want to watch. What the heck went down for that to appear?
It was a two-parter as well. You just saw this mustache sort of come out of the shadows at the end of episode 1.
Yeah.
I was going to say what happened at the end of episode 1 is the Daleks are like exterminate, and then from the other side you just hear wah, and then it just cuts off. Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, I agree with the both of you as well. Again, it's not a particularly divisive hit on this section, but I love the Enterprise D, and I fully acknowledge it's entirely because it was the first kind of series that I fell in love with and the first ship I knew, because objectively it's not my favorite starship design. Like, I much prefer the more traditional, original Enterprise type, saucer drive section, the cells, and the Enterprise D is way more like one organic clump, I guess, for want of a better way to put it. But again, I always thought it was cool when the saucer separated, and yeah, it's just because I got that used to seeing it week on week, and because I've got like massive wall decorations of the Enterprise D and stuff, because to me it says Star Trek to me, that ship. So yeah, definite hit for me as well. And yeah, kind of cool that they were massive, like city sized, and had families on board and stuff as well.
Just going off what you were saying though, just what you mentioned there about how it's all kind of one sort of meshed together kind of organic thing rather than having the different sections. I think I prefer that.
Well, that's similar to Voyager in that respect, because Voyager doesn't have like a separate drive section.
No, Voyager's basically all on the same level, whereas the original is like, it's very clearly got different defined sections.
Yeah. Yeah, different strokes, isn't it, for different folks, as they say. But yeah, I mean, I love every starship, if I'm perfectly honest. But yeah, I do have a soft spot for the original design and the sort of simplicity of it. Anyway, you were going to want to get me to the next one, because this is by special request of Andy. Hit or miss Deanna Troi. What would you think?
Go on, Andrew.
So I don't know what the fandom's like opinion of her overall is. I don't know the general consensus. I fucking love Deanna Troi, if for nothing more than the fact that, at least to me, she is an absolute meme.
Fair enough.
And that makes me so happy. I think Phil's even mentioned that when we do watch Star Trek, he sort of sees my face, because I sometimes have really like a really difficult time focusing a lot on some things, like when I'm watching them. But he's noticed, I think you commented on it one of the last times we were watching, that whenever I hear Deanna Troi's on screen, I just sort of light up and watch, just I'm like, what nugget of gold is she going to say next? I love her. I don't care if she's not a particularly good character. I just love her.
I think she's popular enough. Yeah.
I think she's an absolute meme, and I love it.
Awesome, Phil.
I struggle with this one, because as a meme, as a thing to just observe and sometimes recoil in wonder, sometimes in absolute terror at, Deanna Troi is a hit. Otherwise, as a character that sometimes just doesn't make any sense. Like, come on, you're supposed to be a mildly logical being. What are you doing, Deanna? There's a lot of times where I've sat there and just stared and I was like, what? Why you're contributing nothing to the story here?
Well, that's not true. She had the very important task of going, "Ooh, Captain, I sense they might be deceiving us." Ooh.
She was busy eating a lot of ice cream as well.
Yeah.
I'm sure though in the early seasons, before they'd really figured her out, there was more than a few scenes where you'd get like the Ferengi or somebody on the view screen going like, "Picard, you scum, we will destroy you," and then cut to Troy going, "Captain, I sense they're angry." Really? Did you pick that up, love?
Just out of curiosity, did we end up watching the actual episode that YouTube poop is from? I feel like we did watch it. Yeah. I thought we watched it, and I couldn't get through the ice cream scene without thinking of just the dub. I couldn't watch it because all I could think when she was eating the ice cream was, "I'm a big chocolate slut." It's just.
I will link to it in the description.
Please
it's a funny little comedy next gen sort of dubbed skit, but yeah.
It's a bad lip reading, it's so good. I will say as well, I think one of the things that really made me just love her as a character is I think she provided probably my favorite ever scene that I've ever seen in Star Trek, which was when Data gets a beard.
Oh,
And that phenomenal moment where I'm pretty sure it's confirmed that she did genuinely break character, and that's why she had to leave. But it's the part where Data's like, when I stroke the beard thusly, do I not appear more intellectual? And she just goes, I'm sorry, I have to go now, goodbye. And then you hear her just pissing herself laughing as she leaves, and it's so iconic and I love it.
nice. Oh, it's moments like that are great, yeah.
I love the fact that even my friends who haven't seen Star Trek, one of my best friends, I don't think has ever seen an episode of Star Trek, even she quotes that scene. Because I've shown it to her and we find it so funny.
Oh, nice. And, Phil, so what side did you come down on then, hit or miss at the end?
Just for all the weird and wonderful moments, she's got to be a somewhat anomalous hit.
A soft hit, yeah. Fair enough. Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. She started out and they didn't really know what to do, and she was written either very superfluous or very kind of sexist. And again, it's that kind of, you can tell the series started in the 80s because there's a therapist on the bridge, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense within itself. Because no other starships, as far as I'm aware, have a counselor like right next to the captain.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it was a little bit weird, but she definitely came into her own towards the last sort of couple of series. Thinking of specifically Face of the Enemy, I think in series 6, maybe. And then
toward the end, as you say, and in the movies, she seemed
the movies definitely,
far more fleshed out as a character.
Yeah, definitely.
I will say I do completely agree. But obviously, we're in series. I think we're most of the way through series 3 now, and I do completely agree that yes, in the early seasons especially, they really don't know what to do with her. But for some reason, that just kind of added to my enjoyment of her as a character.
I guess it's amusing, yeah.
Exactly, because I find it funny, even though I know it's not particularly the best writing, or they just have this character that they never know what to do anything with. But for me personally, it just adds to the enjoyment because it means that whenever she does say something, it's usually something really stupid or mundane that I just get a laugh out of.
That's fair enough. Yeah, I think I would say the same. She's a hit though because of all the things we said, and because she's one of the longest continuing characters. She did at least 2 or 3 Voyager appearances, at least 1 Enterprise appearance, 1 Picard. So, and as anybody who heard the Picard
does she appear in Picard?
She does, and as anybody who heard the review will know, I loved her appearance in that. So there you go. So I'm going to do one more then on the hit or miss section, and I'm going to take a punt that it's something that you might have seen from Voyager, Andy. But if not, you can always do a Google image search. And I'm going to say hit or miss the Delta Flyer. What would you say?
Ooh.
What do you first, Phil, while Andy's clearly image searching that?
Right. It's a handy little thing.
Mm.
I always found the look of it to be a bit odd. I think I'm going to have to put that down as a miss because with that, I can see why it would be practical and necessary, but my brain always used to go with, why don't they just use the transporter? And I know there will be certain situations where that's not going to be.
Yeah. Same reason they had shuttles, really. I mean, fair enough.
But just for that and just the look of the thing, it just looks like a strange arrowhead, which is kind of cool, but I'm gonna put it as a miss.
I can see where you would say it's very different from sort of Starfleet design because it doesn't have any recognizable nacelles or anything on it. It's just all one thing.
It's just one sort of little blob, sort of like triangular blob thing, and it would be. It comes off as, you say, not really Starfleet, some sort of maybe other alien sort of race or faction has cobbled this together, and then Starfleet has sort of latched on or just sort of taken it under their wing.
Well, essentially that's more or less what happened, except instead of a random alien, it was just Tom Paris cobbling something together. We'll use that. Why not?
Why not?
Yeah. What about you then, Andy? Have you had a chance to look up an image yet?
Yes, I have. Thank you for calling me out like that. I appreciate it. No, I don't think I've seen this yet. I will say, however, looking at pictures of it, don't lampoon me for saying this. Design-wise, it actually, if color scheme like not included because it's completely different color, the design and the shape kind of reminds me of I think it's Obi-Wan's like ship from Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah,
the red one. It kind of looks like that.
Okay.
It's a similar kind of design, the sort of arrowhead thing. I think that was Obi-Wan's ship.
Yeah, I suppose if it had the fold-out wings, it would look a bit like a Jedi Starfighter, I suppose.
Yeah. I'm sorry for bringing Star Wars into this. I know that's like a...
That's fine.
It's heathenistic to do that.
No. I'm still a fan of Star Wars. Not half as much, but yeah.
I will admit I have seen way more Star Wars than I have Star Trek, but I think that's because I grew up with the films. So yeah. But anyway, yeah, I can't really have an opinion on it. I can't say I'm particularly liking its design. I don't think it's bad. I just don't think it's particularly phenomenal.
Right.
But yeah.
That's good. Well, in the interest of balance, I'm kind of pleased we've ended up with a miss. But yeah, I love it. I think it's also reminiscent to me of the, and I didn't even really watch this show, but the Raiders from Battlestar Galactica, in the way that they're kind of triangular and have attached engines.
See, that's what I was thinking. It doesn't seem like a Star Trek thing, or at least a Federation thing. It seems like it's from a different show.
Yeah, perhaps, but I will say when you compare it to, for example, the ship from Picard, it makes it look like the most Starfleet thing in the world, because that mess is just straight from one of the Wipeout games just into Star Trek. Doesn't belong there at all.
That's a very fair point.
But yeah, anyway, I love the Delta Flyer. I think it's kind of a cool idea. You know, Tom Paris loving hot rods and wanting to make a sort of a Federation shuttle into a kind of hot rod cool thing. And I like how it's all kind of compact and cool looking like that. Don't love that it has Borg elements in, because Voyager was guilty of doing that a lot. So every time they had a crisis or something that needed patching up, it was, use Borg components. And that got old after a very short while, sorry. So I could have lived without that. And I really didn't see the point of them destroying the Delta Flyer, spoiler alert, at the end of season 6, and then just having an identical one apparently rebuilt at the start of season 7. It was completely redundant. So yeah, I'm not fond of that plot idea either. But sorry about spoiling that one. You'll have to just forget it if you ever reach Voyager season 6, I guess. Although not that it matters in the grand scheme of things. But,
yeah, it'll be back again straight away. It's fine.
It's so weird. But yeah, absolutely. So that's enough of the hit or miss. Then we'll move on this week. As I mentioned, we're going to be beginning our analysis of the episode Yesterday's Enterprise from season 3 of The Next Generation. And just to give a quick synopsis, as I've been told I should, in case anyone hasn't seen the episode, excuse me, essentially there is a rift in space and the Enterprise C arrives through it to meet the Enterprise D, its immediate successor. But this causes the timeline to change into one where the Federation is at a losing war with the Klingons, and Picard and the Enterprise D crew, including a bizarrely resurrected Tasha Yar, have to decide whether or not to send the Enterprise C back through the rift to repair the timeline but ultimately die, or whether to let them stay and face this dark timeline. So, enough from the description. Andy, Phil, do you have any initial kind of spoiler-free thoughts about the episode Yesterday's Enterprise before we hit the notes?
I'll let you go first, Chocolate Slut. You can go.
Thank you. You're so gracious. I'm trying to think of what I can word without it being too spoilery. I just think it's a very good story about ethics. Ethics. Lots of ethics and morality. Just the way that they handle what could have been a fairly, I mean, it is a kind of tricky subject. You know, you've got these two crews meeting out of time, and then there's a potential, well, there is a conflict which should never have arisen because of the situations, and then trying to find a way to overcome that. And I don't really want to say much more without, wait until we sort of get into things, but I just like how things develop and progress throughout it.
Fair enough. And what about you, Guinan's bitch? What was your initial spoiler-free thought?
For the record, that's what we put our names as on the restream software that we use for recording. It's a really interesting sort of alternate universe story that handles its premise really well. Honestly, I think the smart thing of focusing more on sort of character dynamics and the morality as opposed to like having loads of action It's very
I don't know,
nicely acted, and
I'd say it has plenty of action, especially for like 1991 or whatever as well, personally. But yeah, anyway. I see what you're saying, though. It focuses more on character than just like battles, but I think the battle in it's pretty epic within itself.
I've made a note about that, but in general, I almost think that Star Trek seems to do best when it's focusing more on dialogue and morality.
Anyway, so as usual, I'll probably go through this episode in kind of chronological order. If you've been listening, you'll know what that entails. And again, Andy and Phil, if you have any thoughts, opinions, or kind of things I've missed or skipped over, feel free to jump in anytime, and we'll go over it. But therefore, we will start with the very beginning of the episode, which is a pre-credit scene, which is one of the rare couple of times that are in our timeline. And we start with Worf, which I always forget when I haven't rewatched this episode in a while that this is the episode that introduced the running joke that Worf loves prune juice because it's a warrior's drink. And I love that became such an ongoing joke that even like it's what he orders at DS9 when he goes into Quark's bar. And people who hadn't watched this episode would have no idea what that joke's about. But I'm kind of fond of that ongoing thing.
Yeah, that's like the first thing that I've got noted down here is just prune juice or warrior's drink.
Absolutely, because it's brilliant. It's so weird, and yet you can kind of see the logic in it as well.
Yeah,
yeah.
Of course, it's something that a Klingon like Worf is gonna really take to.
He's basically having a sex talk with Guinan as well. It's all like,
oh yes,
yeah. Isn't he talking about wanting
human
to find
women being too fragile?
Yeah.
Absolutely,
yeah. I remember because when that came up, because Sarah was down when we watched it last night, she went, "All right, Wolf, calm down."
Yeah, exactly. That was my thought as well. And it's so weird. He does the most creepy friggin' sex offender laugh as well when Guinan's like, "Ooh, there's several women in the crew that could handle you," and he's like, ha, 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 ha. Like, dude, that's creepy. Cut it out, man. So we end up basically that he's called to the bridge. We see through the 10 forward window that there's some kind of weird anomaly happening, and Guinan immediately just says no, which gives us an indication that something's going very weird. And then we see the Ambassador class Enterprise C emerging from a portal and get a really cool scene, which I noticed the direction of, which is basically as the timelines shift, you're on Picard and you see Worf behind him initially, then he blocks him, then things shift and we get into the new timeline and he looks behind him and it reveals that it's the formerly deceased Tasha Yar behind him at the security.
Yes, I made a note that was a really cool transition.
It was.
I liked the way that was edited. That was really well done.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I loved that transition.
One thing when I first watched it, is that it's more obvious to me now, rewatching it, because I know what's coming and what's going to happen. But when I first watched this, I was a little taken aback, which is possibly part of the intended effect, really, because Tasha was just suddenly there and was like, wait a minute, what the hell's going on?
Yeah.
And just the transition, like now when I'm watching it, it's quite noticeable. You see the lights dim to blue, the uniforms have changed. But when I first watched it, maybe I just wasn't paying enough attention. But I remember just not fully grasping what had happened until like a good 5-10 minutes into the episode.
I can't even remember the first time I watched it because I would love to have remembered having that effect of like, what the heck, she's dead kind of thing. But I never really had that moment. I think I probably read about the episode before I'd seen it or something. But I would imagine that would be quite impactful for anybody that was watching for the first time. And,
yeah. That was a weird moment.
Yeah.
What are you doing here?
Yeah. But Tasha's one of the high points of the episode, as I'm sure I'll get more into, though. But I just love she's finally kind of given her dues in this episode. And it's all about her at the end, isn't it, really? But regardless of that, it's kind of nice. Immediately you get the sense that Guinan knows there's been some kind of change as she looks around the 10 forward. And it's now like military people with guns strapped to them and stuff having their rations or whatever in the bar. And then you cut straight from that to the shot of the Enterprise C, which I've said is kind of like the glory shot of it. It's the Starship porn shot where you're kind of like really up close and you're seeing what it looks like. So I am kind of curious what both of you
will say, I like how another way of distinguishing between the new timeline is that they have Guinan in basically the exact same outfit but in a completely different color. I don't know, that really tickles
blue
me.
Now.
Yeah.
Well, because Guinan hasn't really changed all that much, being that kind of weird anomaly that can sense changes. But to my point, though, as I was saying, what are both of you guys' opinions on the Enterprise C as it appears in the episode?
I love the way that as in its appearance, or just how it like actually.
No, not like its plot function, just basically how it looks. Do you think it's a cool design, or?
I think it's a cool design. Yeah. I really like. I was gonna say I really like how it actually shows up in the episode. I think that's very well done. Yes. And I like that it's kind of slow and looming because it kind of adds to the tension of, oh god, what's going to happen?
Yes, I agree. Awesome. And what about you, Phil? Fan of the Enterprise C design, or not so much?
No, I really like it. The only class of ship that I like more than the Enterprise D is unfortunately not the Enterprise C, but it's still beautiful, is an Excelsior class ship.
Oh, nice. Fair enough.
I do like an Excelsior, but the C is very pretty, and just seeing it come out of the anomaly, that wormhole, it's a very nice shot. It just looks so pretty.
Yeah, and again, it's dotting a little bit ahead, but I sometimes do that. I think you're absolutely right, Andy. The way that it moves kind of slowly, like it's lumbering at you, clearly damaged. But even at the end, when you're on the clock because the Klingons are attacking and it's moving towards the rift, and my sense of watching the episode is just like, move, and it's just edging very slowly closer to the rift, and I'm like, come on, go faster. But yeah, that's the whole point, isn't it? It's kind of this big lumbering beast of a thing that's obviously a bit more primitive. In terms of the design, I really like it. As a kind of interim point between the Excelsior and the Galaxy class, I think it really works. But at the time and ever since, I just really didn't think we saw enough of it because it still has only ever appeared in this one episode. And there's so many other classes of ship that have had multiple appearances that it's like, why don't we see another Ambassador class ship? I want to see another one. But anyway, I suppose that's just me being geeky a little bit. But regardless, talking about kind of changes in the timeline and stuff, I love the touch that immediately you start the episode instead of a captain's log with military log, combat date.
That was a nice little change.
Yeah, because it gives you everything. And even within that log, Picard saying we've encountered the Enterprise C, immediate predecessor to this battleship. And I'm like, oof, you're not a battleship. That's jarring in the way that even Guinan explains it later. It's not really supposed to be a warship. But yeah, the next scene that I've made a note of was a little bit iffy for me because it kind of got very talky and sciencey, and it's where they're trying to explain the rift because I don't really think you needed to.
Yeah, I agree.
I like that they link it to kind of it was possibly formed because of the intensity of weapons kind of crossfire or something, and because the battle was that intense. Like, okay, fair enough. I can see what you were going with there, but at the same time, you don't really need to explain it. Just say, it was a rift in time that opened up. We don't know why, but it happened. So
yeah, that happens a lot in science fiction. It never needs explaining.
Exactly. Yeah. So I've made a note here because we get the directing credit that this episode is directed by David Carson. He is a director who also directed the DS9 pilot Emissary, which I talked about in a previous review. And as I mentioned in that review, he was also the man who directed Star Trek Generations, the theatrical film. So that might explain a little bit of why Phil's a fan of the episode as well as that movie.
I do also, just from a pure aesthetic point, and obviously they're going to look slightly different because it's an older ship, but the use of the older Starfleet's uniforms on the crew of the Enterprise C, they could have easily just gone with the same style of costumes that the crew on the D are using, but that they've gone with those older style costumes to really make that visual difference. It's just a nice little touch for me.
Yeah, I made a note of that later, but I will say it. I may as well say it now. That I agree. The uniforms being the ones from the movies, but just subtly changed enough because they've taken the kind of polo neck thing from underneath the jacket, and it's obviously got the comm badge where it would have just been like a badge that wouldn't have communications in it previously.
Yeah.
So it's just slightly more advanced than the movies, but even the ship itself, when you see the bridge, it looked to me like it would totally fit into the original series films, that bridge. So it seemed like it was like the previous iteration to whatever the Enterprise D is, where it's gone all, like I said, hotel lobby or whatever, and the bridge turns from a submarine to a hotel lobby very quickly. But yeah, it's very, as somebody who watches the movies and enjoys them, it was nice to see that kind of little bit of visual continuity, I thought. So I agree with you on that one. So yeah, I kind of like that. There's a couple of times when the Enterprise D almost steps in it, like when Picard says, "This is Captain Jean-Luc Picard of a Federation starship," because we know how that sentence would finish, and that would just invite way more questions, like of the Starship Enterprise. What?
What are you doing?
But then I love how Crusher, being the absolute idiot that she is, just completely disregards this, forgets about that problem, and just goes, "Oh, I've got to get her back to the Enterprise." Crusher, you fool!
Yeah, just blow it all within the first 5 seconds. Why not?
Exactly. Yeah, and it's like any other time she would be like, "I'm going to get her back to sickbay." You know, that's all you needed to say. It was as simple as that. but no.
I didn't even think of that.
Yeah.
I do think the romance between Tasha and, I'm sorry, I forgot the name of the lieutenant.
Richard Castillo.
Thank you. I forgot the name of it during the episode when I was writing the notes, so I just put the other lieutenant. But I do think the romance between Tasha and the other lieutenant develops a bit too unrealistically fast, but it doesn't necessarily detract from the episode, as it does only have 45 minutes to handle a lot of plot threads with different characters.
Yeah, I think it does enough within the time that it's given, because it's not like it's just one scene, and it is a gradual... Yeah, it's gradual wearing down without one. That sounds wrong, but like she doesn't immediately like see him and go, "Ooh, the handsomest man in the world." It's kind of like they obviously bond and they develop a little bit of closeness, and even that point when I think it's Captain Garrett of the Enterprise C says, "Oh, you will have to liaise closely with Tactical," and she's like, "That's me, sir." I'm like, "Oh yeah, liaise very closely, I'll bet." But so yeah, they are kind of stuck together, and they're together permanently that whole time. So. It makes it kind of sense, and it gives you that good old-fashioned doomed romance, which is always nice.
I definitely don't have a problem with how it turns out, and obviously it kind of ends up being probably the main emotional core of the story. I mean, Tasha's kind of the main focal point of the episode, but just as a point, I just wanted to mention that, I do think it is not like completely believable, but not in a way that detracts from the episode at all. It still works for what it needs to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. The next thing I have a bit of an issue with, if they are indeed a warship in the middle of this really tense military type situation, why the heck is the bartender allowed just to wander onto the bridge?
Yeah.
Because
she's
Guinan. Guinan can do what she likes.
She just wanders out.
You are correct there, to be fair. But I do love the idea of they're in the Klingons attack, everything's in peril. The ship's about to blow up, and Guinan just walks in with a tray of shots. Vodka, anyone? No.
Well, that was the thing. I did have an issue with that, because I was like, if the timeline has altered like this, why is 10 forward still there? But they kind of make it relatively clear in the episode that it's not a bar anymore. It's just like a rec room, because they go to her for rations and emergency supplies. And the painting on the back wall is now just literally the registry of the ship stamped on the back, so it's not like as inviting of an environment either. So I was like, okay, that makes kind of sense. Although it still does beg the question of why Guinan's on there in the first place. But if she wasn't,
I think that works. I think that works. Fair enough.
Yeah, fair enough. Awesome. This next scene I absolutely adore, where Guinan just sort of points out to Picard that things aren't right, like uniforms and the bridge and the fact that there's no children on board, and then Picard pointing out, well, there wouldn't be, we're at war, and her just saying, no, we're not, at least we're not supposed to be, and then this is not a ship of war, this is a ship of peace, and recognizing that the issues all arose when the old ship, the Enterprise C, arrived. So I was like, nice.
Guinan's just so good in this episode. I fucking love Guinan.
I would say, yeah. I mean, it comes up in another couple of scenes as well, but I think Patrick Stewart and Whoopi Goldberg are both outstanding in the scenes that they get together.
Absolutely. Yes, I made a note of that later.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving to the sickbay scene, I thought was a little heavy-handed, because it's basically just Captain Garrett giving you exposition. But I don't really know how else you could have done that, when she's explaining, we were in a battle. It was Narendra 3, a Klingon post. We were, we were outnumbered by Romulan warbirds, and then something happened, and we ended up here. And it was like, okay, I get you needed this, but it's kind of like an info dump at this point.
I agree, but I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, because it gets a lot of the exposition out of the way, so they can start focusing on the more emotional side of the narrative that it seems to want to lean on more.
Yeah, and it does actually function on in the respect that it's Picard says that he's concerned about the effect on the timeline if they return, and then Garrett points out the more pressing issue, which is, dude, if we return, we're dead. So don't worry about us having knowledge of the future, because we're not going to last 5 minutes if we go back anyway. Which then basically pivots the episode to the key thing, which is so if we send them back, things might be better, but we're basically sentencing them to death. Which it's kind of nice to have those stakes clarified for you.
Yeah, I agree.
Which is cool. I liked the scene between Captain Garrett and Dr. Crusher, where they're clashing over, captains always want to do too much, and doctors always coddle their patients. And I was like, this is, to me, it's quite reminiscent of McCoy and Kirk from the original series.
Yeah, I got that noted there.
Awesome.
Their interactions were like a lot like McCoy and Kirk.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm pleased to. Yeah, it wasn't just me then. You picked up on that as well.
I like Beverly. I like Beverly quite a lot.
Yeah, she doesn't get a lot to do in this episode, but she's.
She doesn't.
Apart from blowing the plot, I guess, at the very start.
A couple of notes I do have that I just want to go over just before we go through. I made a note that I really love the dark and gloomy atmosphere of the Enterprise C. I really like how that set works. I like how almost dark and distressed it looks. It just adds to the whole vibe of what the story's trying to do.
Yeah.
I think the acting's pretty good across the board. I made that note pretty early on. I think everyone pulls their weight performance wise. And I also really like the fact, because we have mentioned this now, so I'll just put it there. I really like the fact that the solution for the problem is basically given to not just us as the audience, but the characters fairly early on. But the story then smartly uses the rest of its runtime to focus more on the emotional weight and the morality of the characters' decisions. Yeah.
Well, it never explicitly states that it would work either, which I think is kind of key, because it's if you send them back, Guinan is telling Picard, oh, it'll work, but we as the audience, were well, how do you know this? You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're leaving a lot up to chance. This is we've got a hunch that this might work. It could just go really badly, and then we're down one ship, and the Klingons are still on our ass. But
exactly, yeah, and I mean, even when Geordi says we don't even know if we're alive or dead, clearly it was a reference to Tasha Yar, and it's designed so that the camera can then go do and show you her face. But he's right; we don't know anything about what this other timeline is that they're trying to reset. So they could be. Anything could be happening. They could be in a worse war for all they know. So yeah, it ultimately, I suppose, comes down to how much Picard trusts Guinan, and I love that, because that is, again, that's the focal point of the episode and a lot of other episodes. And it's kind of good that he does show by the end that he absolutely trusts her, even in this weird timeline.
Yeah, I really love the fact that Guinan kind of gets the spotlight a lot in this episode. Even though she's not as heavily featured as, say, Tasha is, at the end of the day, she kind of is the core. Alongside Tasha, she's kind of the core part of the narrative, because she has kind of the answers.
Yes,
and she's the one who sort of negotiates with the characters and sort of helps guide them through their feelings about certain things, as we'll see later with both Picard and Tasha.
Yeah, I think it's ingenious to point to have that be a character who's the reason why you know of the other thing. Because it is my absolute favorite scene in the episode when Picard goes back and just says he can't ask these people to go back and sentence them to death without being given more. And I think that's very kind of Jean-Luc Picard.
I was about to say that's very Picard. That's exactly the sort of thing I would have expected him to say.
Absolutely. And it's one of Patrick Stewart's many, many great line deliveries, but when Guinan kind of says, I can't give you any more, it's all I've got, and he just goes, it's not good enough, damn it, not good enough. And I do like that Guinan is the voice of kind of reason of, well, the war's already cost lives, and I've never imposed myself on you or anything, but I'm that sure about this. And you've got only my trust in you to help you decide, which is the character moments there are just so perfect. And the fact that, I love that the argument basically, in a sense, neither one of them's wrong, which is the best kind of argument, because you can't feel like
you can kind of see both sides of it.
Yeah. So you're not going away going, oh, Picard, you're being an unreasonable jerk. And you're not going away going, oh, Guinan, give him more. Because you're this is a crap situation, but you're both right. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I made the note that Whoopi and Patrick have really great on-screen chemistry, especially in this scene and then the one later where they're in his office. They have amazing chemistry together.
And it's kind of weird how we've had that tense scene and then it's immediately afterwards that you see Guinan spying Tasha Yar, and just the sense of oh crap, she knows, because we, the viewer, are already one step ahead on this. When we've, as Phil said, at the start, we're Tasha Yar, where's she?
I think that's one of the reasons why I really like Guinan as a character anyway, as we've already covered. But in this episode in particular, I love the fact that it's really nice to have a character who, if you think about it, she's the only character who is as on board or knows as much as we as the audience do.
Yes.
Obviously, she knows that something's fucked up, that the timeline's gone wrong. She knows that Tasha's meant to be dead. And obviously, the only other people who know that are we as the audience. So it's kind of nice to have that kind of like have a character who is as aware as we are. It's like a really nice change. It's really nice. I really like that.
A little thing, but I like that character-wise, you're not left feeling that everyone was kind of hands behind their back, marched to their death, because they point out that some of the Enterprise C crew want to go back, even knowing that they might die.
Yeah, that was a really nice touch.
Yeah, because various reasons. They didn't want to be out of time. They didn't think their family would recognize them, or they didn't like this world they were in, or whatever. So, and related to that plot-wise, it's good that Picard then explains to the audience, the war's going much worse than we're saying. We're 6 months from surrender. This isn't. It's basically giving the audience the key that, like, look, this isn't a timeline that we can just make the most of. This next scene, again, I have a slight bugbear about, because one single bird of prey attacks them and then disappears, and I was like, for plot reasons, that was purely just because you wanted to kill off Captain Garrett, and it's so transparent. It's like,
I will say, I do find, even the second time around watching it yesterday, I think I'd forgotten that she dies. So yesterday when we were rewatching it, I was like, oh shit, she's dead.
Yeah, they kind of try to explain that that's why Tasha going on board wouldn't be that weird, because it's like, well, historically she was never supposed to be there, but by the same token, Captain Garrett would have been supposed to be there, so they just swapped one woman for another, and that was somehow like that balanced the temporal scales or whatever, which you don't need. I mean, it's completely superfluous, but it doesn't ruin the episode either. So, and I suppose it does give you a hint of like how tense things are getting with the Klingons, because they're attacking everywhere. So
yeah, I did find her death very shocking. I think it's kind of like, I mean, there may be more gruesome ones that I just don't know about yet, because obviously I'm not as well versed in everything that happens as you two are, but like, I feel like the way she dies is quite gruesome.
Captain Garrett, yeah. I mean, there's worse, I guess, but it's kind of weird how it's just like, a bit of shrapnel in the head, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's
just
quite
a big
graphic,
lump sticking out the forehead.
Yeah, I did just make the note. I think Captain Garrett's death is a big surprise, but I do think it was a good way to sort of move the plot along a little bit, because it starts building the stakes up a bit more.
Right. Yeah. Fair enough.
Because rather than, obviously, like, the dialogue is like probably the best aspect of this, like the dialogue and the performance, and the fact that it does focus so heavily on the character stuff. But it is nice that we have these moments of, oh shit, yeah, there is a Klingon war going on. Oh crap, that captain's now dead now. Shit, that really puts things in more of a predicament, doesn't it?
Yeah. I did think it was nice and eerie that Guinan like knows it's Tasha without looking. That was a bizarre moment when she's like, "Hello, Tasha," and she's got her back to her. But I love the scene where Tasha saying, we knew each other a long time. We weren't meant to know each other at all. You're supposed to be dead. And then, Tasha asking Guinan, her kind of sort of snippily saying, I don't have alternate biographies of the crew, but then kind of breaking down with, well, I know it was an empty death and a death without purpose. And I was like, that moment almost brings me to manly tears, I won't lie, because having lived through that death, it's like, yep, it was crap. So it's great writing and acting, but her kind of saying, I've always known the risks that come with a Starfleet uniform. If I'm to die in one, I'd like my death to count for something. Because again, we as the audience get choked up because we're like, yes, give her actually a meaningful, death in the plot line instead of just the worthless one we got, which is really nice. Just a triumph of dialogue, but I absolutely love the line, and it's hugely famous, but it's still great. Let's make sure history never forgets the name Enterprise. Come on, that's just cool. Yeah. And as I've kind of alluded to, I do think the battle, considering the low budget and the fact they're using actual models, I think the battle looks really well done, which is really cool. And I love that this is probably, I think it might be the first time or maybe the second when we get the whole situation with engineering going to crap and the warp core about to breach and Geordi running around like a headless chicken. And I was like, this happens entirely too often on the Enterprise D. But I was disappointed he didn't do his famous Indiana Jones roll under the closing door thing that he usually does.
Yeah, I was expecting that. I was like, what?
No.
Oh, Geordi, you're not going to do your special role.
Nice, but
that's the only reason I watch Next Gen for, is to see Geordi do his special little role. That's the only reason.
Absolutely. Well, that's again another reason why you love Generations, clearly.
Yeah.
I'm just going to very quickly do, because I only have a few notes left, and we've pretty much covered this. Well, we've covered the scenes anyway, basically. The only other notes I have that I put, the scene between Tasha and Picard is really touching and a lovely bit of closure for her as a character. Seeing her taking a stand and deciding her own fate and choosing how she dies is emotional, but very well earned by the end. I really like that. And I put, I love the nice long action scene. I really like the battle scene. It's nice, like you said, it's very well done. It's a nice way to sort of ramp up the tension to the end and sort of, build things up for, hoping for the Enterprise C to actually make it to the wormhole, which obviously it does.
Yes,
and then my last note was, quite fittingly, my last note was, there's a surprising lack of Deanna Troy in this episode.
Well, I did make a note of that, and I said it's not surprising that Deanna Troy isn't there, because why would a warship have a counselor on board? So it makes sense she wouldn't be in the other timeline. But yeah, I did the same note. I thought it was it's genius to kind of have Worf and Tasha kind of interchange like that, and I do like that they kind of at the very end, Guinan's the one checking that everything's fine, and as much as it's cheesy, that kind of sweet touch of tell me about Tasha Yar. But again, on a very geeky spot type notice, unfortunately, there is a bit of a wardrobe malfunction at the end of the episode, because when Guinan's talking to Geordi, he's still wearing the cuffs of the uniform from the alternate timeline, which they clearly hadn't changed back, which is like, whoops.
One bit I really liked was just before that, before the Enterprise C went through the rift, and the Klingons were signaling, trying to get the Enterprise D to surrender.
Yes.
And Picard just looks at him and is like, that'll be the day.
Yes.
And then
he does the really cool parkour move over the desk. Yeah.
He just vaults the thing and takes command of the phasers.
Of tactical, because Riker had been killed by that
firing from tactical. Yeah, Riker gets freaking blasted. Poor Will.
Oh well, they shouldn't have told him to fire at will. But But that's enough then. If you don't have any more notes, Phil, no?
No. I am good.
Great. So I'll move to the very next section then, which I've kind of I've briefly mentioned to Andy, and it's basically a section that I call Gene's Vision, which is basically my way of kind of pointing out that even when people claim that there are episodes of Star Trek that don't fit this great ideology, there's always moments you can find that do. And again, we've touched on a lot of them, but if you guys had to kind of conceptualize, what would you say are the most kind of Trek ideology moments and themes and things from this episode?
I mean, considering I wasn't exactly sure what you meant when you first said this to me, I'm going to let you guys go first, and then once I kind of know what we're doing, I'll join in.
Right. Well, I just think we've kind of already touched on it, but like, I suppose in a grand sense, the idea of the Enterprise being a ship of peace, not war, and that being kind of a wrong time is very, like, we're from a more noble thing, and even as you hinted, the Klingons being all about honor, and that being enough to even prevent a war is kind of very cool. It's all about that kind of thing. And again, the heroic legacy of the name Enterprise is something that shines through. And the fact that they're even debating, like, should we send these people back? It's not just a matter of, look, just go back, get out of here. And on a sort of more real worldy type level, it's kind of noticeable that this is not only a female captain, but the first female captain of a Starship Enterprise. And nobody makes a big deal of it, which is kind of cool. So, yeah, that was what I kind of picked up from anyway. But what about you guys? Anything at all or that I haven't touched on?
Maybe this is just coming from like a feminist standpoint, but I really like the fact that kind of the core three of the core four like characters for the story are women, but also like a really like strong, like really well like written black characters like Black Woman.
Yes,
so it's really nice as well. The fact that like obviously you got Tasha, you've got Guinan, and then you've got Garrett, who are kind of like three of the four main like anchors for the story is really nice.
Yeah, and then
this is such a really weird thing. I think if I can remember what it is actually called, I think it's called is it Bechdel test?
Yes.
But like the fact that I don't think literally any of the actually no, maybe Tasha does a little bit when it comes to she's talking about the other lieutenant, but for the most part, like the female characters very, very rarely talk about like anything to do with romance or men. In fact, the only scene, apart from obviously Tasha's romance with the lieutenant, the only character who really has any comments about, trying to find a partner is Worf, funnily enough.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And I think the women are never really talked down to or regarded as lesser than. And even Tasha,
which I really like. I really like the fact that they're kind of on even standing.
Absolutely. And even Tasha, when, yes, you've got that kind of cheesy doomed romance as a potential motivation, she kind of makes clear to Picard that's not why she's doing it. It's because she wants to have her death be more meaningful than it would otherwise have been. Because it's not like she's going to live happily ever after with this guy at the end of the day anyway. So
yeah, because they're going to cross the timeline and they're going to die.
Exactly, yeah. So awesome. And what about you, Phil? Did you pick up on any things along those lines?
Yes, I mean, you've both more or less covered what I was thinking anyway, but the focus on the characters, each one having their own moment to shine, and all of them having that, multiple moments of cohesion where they all come together and work together for the greater good, even if they don't really know or understand. They just have to take essentially a leap of faith and trust that what they're doing is going to be the right course of action to be better for everyone, not just for them there and then, but for the future that has been erased. So I really like that they slowly work to realize that.
Yeah, because it is kind of a microcosm, because Star Trek has basically always worked towards having a better world, and in this way they're basically saying you can literally, by doing this action and sending them back, have a better world appear out of nowhere.
You can make that better world. It can just become just by you doing this.
Yes, and it'll manifest. Absolutely, I agree. Yeah, awesome. So what I'll do now then, we will go through our conclusions and our scores out of 5 Starfleet deltas, the little com badges, and I will start with you, Andy.
Let me just get my notes up. So I put conclusion. One of the best episodes of Star Trek that I've seen so far, and easily one of the most memorable for me. Yesterday's Enterprise is a thoroughly entertaining and enjoyable episode of The Next Generation. It was a lovely change to see Guinan take center stage, and the character developed well enough that even though they're only around for this one episode, I genuinely felt empathy and sadness for the Enterprise C crew and their predicaments. I also love that the conclusion basically centers around Picard's trust in Guinan. And whether or not he does trust her enough to... this isn't written, this is just a bit I'm adding in. But I love that kind of becomes like an emotional center point for the episode of Picard proving that he has this much trust in Guinan to trust her judgment and actually send these people to back through the timeline, even though they don't actually know what's going to happen. And then just to round it off, the last bit is... overall, I can absolutely see why it's considered one of the greats. Easily 5 Starfleet deltas.
Excellent.
Delta badges, sorry.
Deltas is good, yeah, good. So, Phil, what about your conclusion and score then?
So, I have so much to say about this that I'm going to try and keep it as brief as I can.
That's fine, go for it.
But I particularly like how, even though Picard, especially in this war timeline that we see him in, he is at the top, but he's still not afraid to step back when he needs to, and listen to those around him when it's most important for him to be taking the advice, the counsel of those around him, instead of just barreling forward and saying, no, I'm the top, I'm in charge, we listen to me. He takes on that more empathetic role of not only empathizing with the crew of the Enterprise C and Captain Garrett, but also his own crew and Guinan, and trying doesn't maybe work as best as he'd initially hoped, but trying to bring everyone together in that sort of, again, that sort of unity, that cohesion between the two, which is I just think is wonderful. And then obviously getting Tasha Yar to actually have a meaningful send-off this time is an excellent part of this episode, because she was a great character and she was bloody robbed with her crappy death earlier in the series. So this at least gives her somewhat of a meaningful and impactful send-off. And all in all, I've got to agree with Andy there. It's a 5 out of 5.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, I'll give my conclusion and score then. And I'll just say that I said it's just a pitch perfect episode of Star Trek, heck of sci-fi television. Absolutely ingenious ideas played out with impact and resonance. The characters still get a chance to shine even in a complex, mind-bending time travel plot. Patrick Stewart is outstanding. Whoopi Goldberg, Jonathan Frakes. But the highlight is Denise Crosby's Lieutenant Yar finally getting the attention and the send-off that she deserved. It's obviously a geeky treat to see the Enterprise C and learning of the importance of another ship called Enterprise, which holds extra weight that the script takes full advantage of. It's a tight 45 minutes that fits in an incredible amount and impresses me on a virtually scene-to-scene basis. Ultimately, it's a story about how heroism is key and things like nobility and empathy could eventually prevent things even as horrific as war. There's never been a neater summation of Star Trek than that for me. History definitely won't forget the name Enterprise. And I would have also given it 5 Starfleet Deltas out of 5. So apologies if we sounded sycophantic, but that makes the average really easy to work out for me, which would naturally be a 5.
Is that the highest scoring episode so far?
That is the first perfect, entirely bang-on 5 score that we've had. And
it's
normally
such
I only
a
have
good episode!
Well, normally I only have 2 guests. The closest we've got was an episode of Lower Decks that was previously topped with 4.75. So yeah, this is definitely, I think, going to be the winner of the season overall, and will definitely be number 1 on the leaderboard.
It is such a good episode.
It is. And if you bear with me, I'll probably need another like 10 minutes because I got a lot of audience interaction to this one, which is weird because last week nobody replied, and this week I had buckets, but I wanted to get through as much of it as I can.
How do you mean by audience interaction?
I basically put out a tweet and say, what are your thoughts on the episode Yesterday's Enterprise?
Okay.
So yeah, this is the section that I call Subspace Communications, which is just the messages that people sent me on social media and stuff. So again, I asked your thoughts on Star Trek Next Gen Yesterday's Enterprise. And again, I'll try and be quick, so apologies for that. But the first one I have here is from @AgentPumpkin, who says, I think it's a great story. I'd have preferred it being a double episode with more background, etc. But yeah, it's one of my favorites. @Skimmerad says, yep, great episode. The only downside, and it's not the fault of this episode, is that I don't really like what happens to Tasha. Spoiler alert, and we'll go any further with that. I liked what little we got to see of the Enterprise C and its crew, and for once I thought the hard choice really did seem convincing. Fair enough. @Sci-Fi Fan 2650258 says, brilliant, and had it not been partly responsible for TNG's success in reaching its own movie era, could have made a great movie featuring both the original series and Next Gen crews. Fair enough. @Pappy1701 says, normally I don't like time travel episodes that reset at the end, looking at you, Voyager, but this one is the exception. The alternate characterizations were well done, the implications of the sea jumping back were significant, and Crosby got a much better send-off in this one. We all agree with that as well. @Green Walker here says, it's so good that it would have deserved to be 2 episodes. I like what-if scenarios in general, and this is one of the best. Okay. @Sadie's Dog Pal says, I personally love Yesterday's Enterprise. Who doesn't like to muse the road not taken? Agreed. @Ian Kerr CDS says, excellent episode, maybe landmark quality, proper sci-fi with action, drama, stakes, and a sneaky way of bringing back Tasha Yar. Agreed. @GeekDoc68 says, I think it was one of the episodes in which TNG really came into its own, and the Enterprise C was a really great ship that we unfortunately never saw any more of. And of course, they gave Tasha Yar a much better and worthier death than being zapped by a black pudding. So, yeah, fair enough. That's one way to put it, I guess. @TroyG65, what I love most about the episode is that Picard trusts Guinan in this reality as well as the Prime one, even when he has no reason to. Great episode, and never let history forget the name Enterprise. @Derryman1 says, it gave us a second chance with Tasha, giving her a much better death and allowing Denise to return in future episodes, so I liked it for that, though I wasn't fond of the idea of a militant Starfleet. I think was kind of the point. But @Eleniana says, I'm a huge Next Gen fan. This is a good episode, but overall it's not one of my favorites. So I'm not quite sure why it's so revered. A rare dissenting voice there, but okay. @Thoron Couch says, set decoration and lighting made it feel like an entirely different ship. The actors are subtly different in their portrayals. Picard especially feels changed because of the war. The story is tight and really moves. The end is exciting, and it's the best use of Tasha in the series. A+. Great. Chris @ShelfNerds, who was my guest just last week, says, this is simply a masterpiece of direction, cinematography, character, and theme. Its strength is in the questions it asks about what kind of death is a good death, and how it positions sacrificial death as heroic and worthy to choose. It's a gloriously grim departure from the norm. @Dr. Beverly Falls says, profoundly moving every single time I watch it. The chemistry between Tasha and Richard is wow. Strong female characters. And again, let's make sure history never forgets the name Enterprise. @Chase March says, I thought it was great. One of the stronger episodes for sure. The series never quite lived up to the premise, though, of a family-driven starship with no bridge crew having a family on board. Okay. @Alan Solara says, it is actually logically the dumbest episode of the entire series. Not quite sure about that. I did ask for clarification on that one, but didn't get it. So regardless. At Jock Glasgow just says again, one of the all-time greats and did justice to Tasha Yar. And finally, at Binary Hands 1 says, all I will say is the best Next Gen episodes are as good, if not better, than the Next Generation films. Whew! That was a long section, but we're through it now. So it just remains for me to say thank you so much to my friends Andy and Phil for joining me here today. And would you like to give sort of the social media details and details of where people can find you and of your other famous podcast?
All I would like to say is I've been Jonathan Frakes. Room. So Phil will know why I said that. You might not. You might do, actually. So a few weeks ago, Sarah introduced us to a TV show, and I'm going to try and remember the name of it. But Jonathan Frakes hosts it.
Yep, I know the one.
Is this story true or false?
It's like Unsolved Mysteries or something, isn't it?
Unsolved Mysteries, that's it. She introduced us to that, and we watched a couple of episodes, and at the end of each one, for some reason, it absolutely just made me piss myself laughing every time he didn't even say goodbye. He'd just go, I have been Jonathan Frakes, and then turned and walked off set. And it amused me that much that I have been doing it myself.
Jonathan Frakes has places to be.
Like to the point, sometimes I will just leave a room and I'll just go, I have been Jonathan Frakes, and then walk out of the room.
I love Phil's logic. It's Jonathan Frakes. He's got places to be.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
He's a busy man.
He's got movies to direct, damn it. He's got to direct
movies
the Dismal
and more
Thunderbirds film.
mysteries to unsolve.
God, some of those are bad, aren't they?
Oh, dear. But yeah, so Andy, where can people find you?
You can find me primarily at the moment on the We Pay For Your Floor podcast that I do with Phil here and our friend Sarah. You can find that on YouTube and Spotify, just at We Pay For Your Floor. It's a very silly podcast. It's kind of improv comedy. We do have like planned sections, but none of it's like scripted, so it's all very just sort of off the cuff. We think it's funny. We think it's fun. It's just us having a laugh. And if you kind of fancy that, come along. I will say it's definitely not for younger people. We're very vulgar and we don't really give a shit about filtering that because that's just our humour. You'll hear talk about Sarah's vagina way more than you'd think, considering we're a gay couple. But yeah, that's if I ever end up actually getting back around to doing it, you can find me on Twitch at Kemp Players if I ever decide to do that again, which I hopefully will. You can also find me just on my personal YouTube channel, Andrew Kemp, where I'm hoping to do some new song covers, primarily in celebration of No Time to Die finally coming out. I might be planning on doing a couple of Bond songs.
Nice.
That's about it for me. And Phil?
Yes, I am Phil.
Master of Darkness.
If you feel so inclined as to pay attention to any of the random ramblings that I have to throw out into the world, you can find me at Crazy Pill Fun, pretty much anything. Just look for the green, slightly smirking dinosaur thing, and that would be me. Particularly on Twitter, I am usually lurking, not really interacting much, and occasionally throwing out random pictures of Kylie Minogue.
Andy, did you give your Twitter address? Do you mind if I pass it across? Or?
Oh, it's just... I need to double check. I think it's just Andy Kemp 1996. I think it's
Andy
just
Kemp
that.
1996. Yeah, it'll be in the description.
Yeah.
If you're fine with me passing it on, it'll be in the description anyway.
Oh,
so
yeah, that's fine. I don't mind.
Awesome. And I will leave a link to my Spotify and to We Pay For Your Floor podcast, YouTube and Spotify in the description.
I will say, if you can watch it on YouTube, it's probably better on YouTube just because Phil...
Oh, it is for Phil's editing.
Phil is our amazing editor, and he puts a lot of visual gags in there that you won't get on the Spotify. But if you just want to listen, Spotify works just as well.
Yes, absolutely. So
YouTube is the preferred format for whatever the hell our podcast is.
It's a lot of fun, and it's one of those things that defies description, but I thoroughly recommend checking it out, because as soon as you've been listening for like half an hour, you'll immediately get what's going on, and you'll be hooked if you're anything like me.
In Mike's own words, the theme song will get stuck in your head for days.
Oh, yes. The theme song is an earworm and a half. Thanks again for joining me so much, guys. I'm definitely going to have you guys on again, because this was great, and I love talking Trek.
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I hope you guys did. Awesome. Yeah, thank you very much. And join me next week when I will be joined by special guest Dominic G. Martin, quite a famous guest. And we will be discussing the Voyager episode, Message in a Bottle. So do tune in for that. And in the meantime, remember, we are Starfleet. Live long and prosper.